Now let's get into this Monday Night Raw stuff, because with less than 2 weeks until WrestleMania, at a time when you would think things would be peaking on these shows, WWE delivered the most abysmal episode of Monday Night Raw all year. If I didn't know any better, I would think Vince McMahon is intentionally trying to sabotage these shows just to make a point that nothing matters because they already have their money. They have their $1 billion. They don't even have to try. See? Look how easy it is. I cannot imagine anyone who works for that company watching this show and thinking it was any good and actually being proud of it. Being proud of what they are putting out there. I cannot conceive of such a thing. They broke up the Hurt Business, which has been one of the few success stories on this show over the past year. One of the highlights of the pandemic era. In these last few weeks, Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander have lost the Raw Tag Team titles. They've lost a 2-on-1 handicap match. And now they have been kicked to the curb. And Shelton lost a match on this show to Bobby Lashley. Now, we cannot 100% dismiss the possibility, however small it may be, that this is all part of an elaborate swerve on Drew McIntyre. But it sure doesn't sound that way. First of all, the stipulation is that the Hurt Business are not allowed at ringside. Now, I don't know how you get around that. If they broke up the Hurt Business, so technically Shelton and Cedric are no longer part of the Hurt Business, and maybe that's their way around the stipulation, but it just feels like I'm reaching now. It sure doesn't sound like any kind of an elaborate swerve. Based on this report from Fightful, that said even the talent involved was blindsided by the decision and they were not happy about it. Vince McMahon is the one who personally made the call. This was not a creative decision from anybody else other than Vince McMahon. This is despite Lashley and MVP being very vocally against the idea in a meeting with Vince McMahon himself. They made it very clear they were not happy about this. They did not agree with this. They did not want this. And Vince is said to have dug in his heels even more. He was even more opposed to the idea of abandoning the breakup, and he dug his heels in so much that there was no changing his mind. He insisted, this is what we're doing. Period, end of story. Now, if you're Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander, because I think Lashley will always, he'll have a certain status on the show. Although it's feeling to me very much like this is all just building to Lashley having the belt taken away from him and just giving Drew his big crowning moment at Raymond James Stadium. That's what this is feeling more and more like to me. I mean, I'll do my predictions on Friday, but unless they do something on the show that changes my mind this week, that's certainly the way it feels right now. That's what we're headed for. But if you're Shelton and Cedric, you are the ultimate losers in this scenario because you know that the two of these guys, both these guys, they're doomed. These guys are doomed, especially Shelton. Remember what they were doing with Shelton before the Hurt Business? Nothing. Fucking nothing. That's what they were doing with Shelton Benjamin. The biggest idea they came up with for Shelton Benjamin a couple of years ago was that stupid shit that lasted all of 3 weeks on TV where they would cut to him in the back for a promo, he wouldn't say anything, and his eyes would dart around like he just drank 6 cups of coffee. And then that went nowhere. That was the start of a comedy gimmick that went nowhere. So if the Hurt Business is really broken up, these guys are done. I mean, Cedric could always go back to doing 205 Live and the stuff he was doing before, but these two guys are dead in the water. And they know it. You know that they know it. MVP and Lashley know it. That's why they were probably arguing hard against the idea. Vince McMahon doesn't care. Because Vince McMahon was never interested in pushing Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander. It was all about trying to build up Bobby Lashley. And it's great. And Lashley now is getting the biggest push of his life. And he has embraced the role. He looks the part. I think he should get a longer run with the championship. He and MVP as a combo are perfect together. I don't want to say it's Lesnar-Heyman, but it's got that kind of vibe to it. Cedric and Shelton, they were just kind of background players to help build up Lashley and get him to this point. They were never a priority. And now Vince McMahon sees Lashley. He's finally attained that status that they always knew he could achieve. He's the champion. Now we don't have a need for these two guys anymore. So they fade back into obscurity where they were before. Back to catering you go. And it's another example of WWE breaking up a team for no good reason. How'd that work out for the Iconics? I wasn't even a big Iconics fan. And I realized how stupid a move that was. How'd that work out for them? How'd that work out for Billy and Peyton? How'd that work out for Otis and Tucker? Or at least Tucker. Otis just traded one partner for another, but at least Otis is on television. If they had something better for these people to do, then that would be one thing. But they don't. They just break them up for the sake of breaking them up. There was no reason to do this other than the obvious, and I said this on Twitter on Tuesday. The day after this happened, I said, I was replying to somebody on Twitter, and they were like, why would they do this? Why would they break up the Hurt Business? And it was pretty obvious why they did this. They really want to make sure that Bobby Lashley does not get cheered at WrestleMania and that Drew McIntyre doesn't get booed. This is why they did what they did at the end of the show with Baron Corbin. Baron fucking Corbin attacked Drew McIntyre after Lashley had put that bounty on his head the week before. SmackDown's own Baron Von Dipshit was there to answer the call. Not to be confused with Alberto Del Dipshit. No relation. McIntyre, Lashley, and Corbin were at one time a faction. I don't know if they ever had a proper name. It didn't last that long. It was for a few weeks or a couple of months, whatever it was. But they were a trio on TV, on Raw. So there is history there with these three. But as awful as Raw is, think about how awful the show is from one week to the next. It is atrocious. It is the worst show on television, wrestling-wise. I don't know that anybody in the world was thinking, you know what this show needs? You know what would make this show more interesting and more tolerable? Baron Corbin. Maybe if you were a dementia patient who was signed up for a new drug trial and they gave you the placebo, then I would expect an answer like that. Then I can understand that. But not from any completely healthy person of sound body and mind. Why would they do this? For the same reason that they're worried that Lashley might get cheered at WrestleMania and McIntyre might get booed. So what better way to guarantee boos than to stick Baron Corbin with Bobby Lashley? That's why they did it. And Corbin will wrestle McIntyre on Raw tomorrow night in a match I'm sure that all of you are just waiting on. You've set your clock app on your phone. The countdown clock is set. You are counting down the hours, I'm sure, until Corbin and McIntyre. So they break up the Hurt Business. They put Baron Corbin on the show, which is enough for an F score right there. We could just end it right there. But we weren't done yet. So we had Sheamus and Matt Riddle. They had their usual good outing. They had a match on this show, non-title. They're going to have a very good match at WrestleMania. They're going to wrestle for the United States Championship. They have great chemistry in the ring. They work well together. Big stage like WrestleMania. I saw the pictures online. Sheamus is bringing back his mohawk for the big show. So I'm sure at WrestleMania they're going to have a fine match. Maybe even a title change. They've not only added train noises to Braun Strowman's matches now, but they have added animated birds to Matt Riddle's entrance when he kicks off his flip-flops. I'm sure it has to do with the weed or there's some kind of joke in there, because otherwise I have no fucking idea why birds would be flying out of his fucking shoes.